Do you know what the most powerful decision you'll ever make is? Walking away, silently. No warning, no dramatic exit. Just you choosing peace over chaos. It's not easy. In fact, it might be the hardest thing you'll ever do. To detach from people, habits, and thoughts that once felt like home, but now feel like prisons. You don't announce it. You don't explain it. You just stop showing up where your soul no longer feels safe. And yet, that quiet exit. It's louder than any argument. It's the moment your energy stops begging to be understood and starts choosing to be protected. The Stoics understood this deeply. Why do we keep feeding those thoughts with noise, drama, and emotional clutter? Why do we stay in places that drain us, just because we're afraid to leave without saying a word? Let me be honest with you. Real strength isn't in confrontation. It's in control. It's in learning to let go of what weakens you without asking for permission. This video is going to walk you through 15 things you must silently remove from your life. No anger, no chaos, just clarity. If that resonates with you, if you're tired of being who the world expects you to be, and you're ready to grow into the person you were meant to become, then please subscribe. Because this might be the first step in your quiet revolution. Let's grow, silently but powerfully. 1. The mask you wear for approval. You don't have to pretend anymore. You really don't. That quiet performance you put on just to be accepted, the nods you give when you disagree, the fake smiles you wear when you're hurt, the silence you keep when you want to speak. It's exhausting. There comes a point where wearing the mask becomes heavier than just facing whatever reaction your real self might get. Maybe it started in school. Maybe it came from family or a relationship, or some moment you didn't even notice. But slowly, piece by piece, you built a version of yourself designed to be safe, to be liked, to be acceptable. And now that version of you is so rehearsed, even you forget it's not real. The truth is, being liked for a mask means nothing. It means they don't actually like you. They like the character you play. That's why it never feels fulfilling. Even when you get the approval, even when you're surrounded by people, you still feel alone. Because deep down, no one really knows you. And how could they? You've kept yourself hidden under layers of what people wanted to see. You keep adjusting your tone, your style, your pace, trying to match what others expect, hoping that if you just keep everyone happy, they'll stay. But what if the price for that approval is your own peace? It's not selfish to be yourself. It's not wrong to have opinions, to walk away, to say no, or to outgrow people who only knew the older version of you. If being real makes someone uncomfortable, that's their discomfort to carry, not yours. You weren't born to perform. You were born to live, to grow, to breathe fully in your own skin without apology. Yes, letting go of the mask will mean losing some people, but you're not really losing them. You're losing the illusion that they were meant for you, because anyone who only wants the version of you that pleases them was never interested in you in the first place. You can feel it when it's time to be real. Your body starts rejecting the act. You feel drained after every interaction that demands the fake smile. You feel hollow after agreeing with something that felt wrong. That's your inner compass screaming for freedom. The Stoics believed in alignment between thought, word, and action. When you say what you mean, when you act from truth, your soul breathes easier. Epictetus said, "If you wish to improve, be content to be thought foolish and stupid." Because sometimes the path to becoming your truest self starts with being misunderstood. And maybe that's the price of honesty, being misread. But it's worth it. Because what's the alternative? Living a life that isn't yours, chasing approval that never fills you, pretending forever. You weren't put here to be a watered-down version of yourself for someone else's comfort. You were put here to walk your own path, even if it's unfamiliar to others. And the strange thing is, when you start living as your real self, you don't just feel free. You actually start attracting people who see you, support you, and love you for exactly who you are, not who you pretend to be. It's a strange kind of peace. The peace that comes from no longer trying to manage everyone's perception. You stop replaying conversations in your head. You stop wondering what they think. You stop editing yourself. And in that space, something quiet but powerful begins to grow. Self-respect, not arrogance, not defiance, just a calm confidence that says, "This is who I am, and I'm okay with that." You don't need to explain it. You don't need to justify it. You just need to live it. Letting go of the mask doesn't mean becoming harsh or cold. It means becoming whole. It means finally allowing the parts of you that have been buried, your voice, your ideas, your real laughter, your boundaries, to rise again. You'll feel awkward at first. You might even feel guilty. That's normal. You've been trained for years to believe that pleasing others is the same as being kind. But the kindest thing you can do is show up truthfully, because that gives others permission to do the same. You'll be surprised at how much lighter life feels when you stop filtering yourself. Conversations become easier, relationships become clearer, and decisions, they stop being about what will they think and start being about what feels right for me. That shift is everything. It's not about becoming rebellious, it's about becoming real. No more nodding when you want to shake your head. No more laughing when something doesn't feel funny. No more saying yes when your body says no. You don't owe anyone the version of you that made them comfortable. Growth is uncomfortable. Truth is uncomfortable. But silence and pretending are worse. They chip away at you quietly until you don't even recognize your own voice anymore. So take the risk. Be misunderstood. Be too much. Be quiet. Be bold. Be unsure. Be evolving. But above all, be you. Let them call it strange. Let them call it selfish. Let them walk away if they need to. But you walk home to yourself. That's where your peace lives. That's where your real power begins. The day you drop the mask is the day you start living for real. 2. The excuse called tomorrow. Let's be real. "I'll do it tomorrow" has probably stolen more from your life than anything else. Not failure, not rejection, just delay. Quiet, harmless-looking delay. It's so subtle that you almost don't notice it. How often you trade today for a promise that never arrives. You convince yourself that you're waiting for the right moment, that things need to align, that you need a little more clarity, or time, or energy. But days turn into weeks, and weeks into years, and the dreams you swore you'd chase get buried under calendars filled with excuses. The most dangerous thing about tomorrow is how reasonable it sounds. It's not dramatic. It doesn't scare you. It just whispers, "Not now," and you believe it, again and again. What we often forget is that action doesn't require perfection. You don't need to have all the answers, or all the resources, or even all the courage. You just need to begin. There's a strange kind of freedom that comes when you stop waiting and start moving. Not rushing, just moving. One step, one small, imperfect action. That first move unlocks something inside you. Momentum, clarity, confidence. All the things you thought would come before action often only show up after it. Waiting won't bring certainty, but doing, that's where everything changes. You know what's worse than failure? Regret. Because at least when you fail, you learn, you grow, you build something real. But regret, that just eats away at you slowly. You look back and realize that the thing you were too scared to start could have been the thing that saved you, freed you, fulfilled you. You'll never be able to rewind the time you spent hesitating. And the truth is, most of the things you delay aren't delayed because of logic. They're delayed because of fear. Fear of not being good enough. Fear of being seen trying. Fear of starting small. But every master was once a beginner. Every great thing began clumsily. What makes it great is that it began at all. We live in a culture that glorifies hustle, but ironically, most people are just hustling in their minds. They plan, they imagine, they dream, but they rarely execute. The idea lives in their head for so long that it starts to feel real, even though it never left the ground. But nothing changes until something moves. That text you're afraid to send, that project you keep overthinking, that change you keep putting off, all of it is costing you energy just by sitting in your head. You carry the weight of what you're avoiding, and the longer you avoid it, the heavier it becomes. There's never going to be a day where everything is lined up perfectly. The fear will still be there, the doubts will still whisper, the obstacles won't vanish, but neither will your desire. And if it keeps coming back, that's not coincidence. That's your deeper self trying to break through the fog of excuses. You don't need a loud breakthrough. Sometimes the most powerful shift comes from a quiet decision. The decision to start, even if it's small, even if it's awkward, even if no one notices but you. Seneca once said, "While we are postponing, life speeds by." That line doesn't hit until you look back and realize how many moments you've let slip, how many passions you buried under distractions, how many conversations you avoided because you were scared of what they might change, how many goals you gave up on before you even tried. Time doesn't wait for clarity. It keeps moving, and you either move with it or watch it pass by. Start where you are. Use what you have. Don't underestimate the power of small actions. 5 push-ups today is better than fantasizing about a perfect workout routine next month. Writing 1 paragraph now is better than obsessing over the perfect novel outline forever. Calling someone you love, even if you don't have the right words, is better than rehearsing a perfect conversation that never happens. Action creates progress. Progress builds belief. And belief transforms everything. When you start doing the things you've been putting off, something strange happens. You stop being afraid of effort. You stop resenting discipline. You start respecting yourself. That self-respect is priceless. It's not about crossing everything off a list. It's about becoming the kind of person who follows through, who keeps promises to themselves, who no longer lets fear dress up as logic. You can still be thoughtful. You can still reflect. But reflection without movement turns into rumination. And overthinking is just fear disguised as preparation. At some point, you have to stop reading about the life you want and start living it. One bold, messy, beautiful step at a time. You might trip, you might fall, but even if you do, you'll be further ahead than the version of you that stayed frozen, waiting for perfect conditions. Your life won't change in a single day, but it can begin to shift today. That's what matters. That you stop giving your power away to a day that doesn't exist. That you realize someday isn't on the calendar. Only today is. And you, not tomorrow, not next year, not when everything is ideal. You are enough to begin right now. 3. That looping tape of the past. It's strange how the past can feel more alive than the present. A conversation that ended years ago still echoes in your mind. A mistake you made once still stings like it just happened. A look, a word, a moment, all still playing on loop over and over again. Some of those memories aren't even that significant when seen from a distance, but they carry emotional weight that never got released. They linger, not because they're powerful, but because they were never truly processed. And so, they become part of your inner dialogue, not in the background, front and center, always reminding you of what went wrong, of what hurt, of what broke. You might think that remembering is necessary, that it protects you from being hurt again. But there's a difference between remembering and reliving. One teaches you, the other traps you, and far too many people confuse self-awareness with self-punishment. You don't need to keep replaying the hardest chapters of your life just to stay grounded. You're not required to keep those wounds open as proof of survival. What happened, happened. You survived, and survival is enough. You don't have to live inside the same story forever. There's a part of you, maybe small, maybe buried, that knows this. That part of you wants peace. It doesn't want to forget what happened, but it doesn't want to be defined by it either. And that's the key. You are not what happened to you. You are not your trauma. You are not the pain. You are the one who went through it, the one who endured, the one who kept going, even if it was messy, even if it was quiet, even if no one noticed. That's who you are, not the victim of the story, but the one still here, still breathing, still capable of rewriting the next page. And yes, it's hard. Letting go of the past feels like betrayal sometimes. You might think that if you release the pain, you're letting the people who hurt you off the hook. Or maybe you're afraid that if you move on, the hurt will come back. But forgiveness, real forgiveness, isn't about them. It's about you. It's not about justifying what happened. It's about finally putting the weight down. Because the more you carry, the less you can move forward. The more space the past takes up, the less room there is for the present to grow. Carl Jung once said, "I am not what happened to me. I am what I choose to become." And that's the essence of healing. You can't change what happened. You can't go back and make different choices. You can't edit the script. But you can decide what you'll do with the pain. Will it become a cage or a compass? Will it hold you in place or point you towards something better? The most painful thing isn't always the event itself. It's the way we carry it afterward. We replay the memory. We analyze every detail. We wonder what we could have done differently. And in doing that, we keep the wound fresh. The mind keeps touching it, poking at it, never letting it scab over. Healing doesn't mean the past disappears. It means you stop letting it dominate your present. You stop waking up every day with your heart already heavy from yesterday. And here's what people don't often admit. Sometimes we hold on to pain because it's familiar. It becomes part of our identity. We get used to being the one who was hurt, who was abandoned, who made the mistake. And without realizing it, we build our self-image around it. So the idea of letting go isn't just about peace. It feels like losing a part of ourselves. But that version of you, the one who went through all of that, they're tired. They've done enough. They don't need to keep reliving it for you to remember your strength. They deserve rest. You don't owe your past anything. You've paid your dues. You've done the reflection. You've carried the lessons. Now it's time to carry only that. The lesson, not the burden. The wisdom, not the wound. The insight, not the pain. You are allowed to change your story. You are allowed to heal without seeking permission. You are allowed to be more than your worst moment. When you catch yourself going back, when the thoughts pull you into old guilt, old anger, old sadness, pause, breathe, acknowledge the feeling, and then gently remind yourself, that was then. This is now. It's not denial. It's a choice to not let something that already happened hurt you again today. The mind can be a relentless narrator. It loves to replay the parts it didn't understand, the parts that scared it, the parts that made no sense. But you are the one listening. And the moment you stop identifying with every thought, you begin to take your power back. You begin to choose new thoughts, thoughts that bring calm instead of chaos, thoughts that support you instead of sabotage you. There's no deadline for healing, but there is a cost for postponing it. Every day spent living in the shadow of what was is a day you don't fully step into what could be. And you deserve more than that. You deserve to wake up without that constant loop in your head. You deserve mornings that aren't heavy with old grief. You deserve to smile and not feel guilty for it. You deserve to move on, even if the world doesn't applaud it or understand it. You can honor your past without being chained to it. You can respect what shaped you without letting it define you. You can be grateful for the strength you gained without keeping the pain that built it. Letting go doesn't mean forgetting. It means choosing freedom. It means whispering to yourself, I'm allowed to be okay now. And that is a kind of quiet courage the world desperately needs more of. 4. Emotional begging. There's a certain kind of silence that follows emotional begging. It's not the kind of silence you choose, but the kind you're left with after you've poured yourself out trying to be enough for someone who was never going to meet you halfway. You try harder, reach further, speak softer, love louder, and still they pull away. You think maybe if you just do one more thing, give one more piece of yourself, they'll finally stay. But the truth is, real connection doesn't require chasing. Love that needs to be begged for isn't love. It's approval wearing a mask. And approval is never worth your peace. Somewhere along the line, we were taught that love is earned. That we have to prove ourselves over and over just to be chosen. We got the idea that being good enough meant pleasing others, even if it came at the cost of our own emotional health. And so we learned to beg. Not with our words always, but with our actions, with our silence, with our lowered standards, with our willingness to keep accepting less while giving more. We beg by shrinking ourselves to avoid conflict, by staying quiet when our heart wants to scream, by smiling when we're breaking inside, hoping they'll finally see how much we're worth. But love isn't a transaction. It's not a prize you earn by sacrificing your self-respect. It's not something you qualify for by jumping through someone else's emotional hoops. If someone makes you feel like you have to work for their attention, their affection, their time, they're not offering love. They're offering a test. And you weren't made to live in a constant exam of your worth. You were made to be met, fully, freely, with respect. There's a kind of love that doesn't ask you to beg, that sees your silence and listens, that notices when your energy changes, not because you make a scene, but because it genuinely cares. That love doesn't punish you with distance. It doesn't make you guess where you stand. It doesn't manipulate you into thinking your value depends on how much pain you're willing to tolerate. But to find that kind of love, you have to first believe you deserve it. You have to stop accepting crumbs and calling it a meal. It hurts to walk away, especially when your heart is still involved. But it hurts more to stay in a place where you constantly have to prove that you matter. There's a slow kind of erosion that happens when you keep chasing people who only respond when you pull away. Your confidence starts to crack, your self-image gets blurry, and you begin to confuse instability with passion, manipulation with intensity, and inconsistency with love. That's how deep the rewiring goes when you live in a space of emotional scarcity. Carl Jung once said, "The most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely. Because when you accept yourself fully, you stop needing others to do it for you. You stop begging. You stop pleading for a seat at tables where you're only invited to be useful, not valued." And yes, it's terrifying at first, because it means letting go of relationships that once felt like home. It means facing the emptiness you used to fill with distraction. It means standing in your own truth, even if it shakes. But what comes next is peace. A kind of inner peace that doesn't need to be validated. A love for yourself that doesn't rely on someone else's approval. You begin to move differently. You stop trying to convince people of your worth. You stop explaining yourself. You stop performing. You just are. And those who are meant for you will see you without needing the show. Sometimes the strongest thing you can do is stop talking, stop fixing, stop chasing. Let the silence speak for you. Let your absence explain what your presence once tolerated, not as a game, not as punishment, but as a boundary, a final act of self-respect. Because you were never supposed to feel like love is survival. You were never supposed to confuse anxiety with intimacy. You were never meant to be the one who always gives, always waits, always explains. You are not half of anything. You were not born to be completed by another person. You are not missing pieces. You are whole. You have always been whole. And the people who cannot meet you where you are not your people. That doesn't make them evil. It just means they're not capable of giving what you need. And your job is not to teach them how to love you. Your job is to love yourself enough to walk away when they can't. This doesn't mean you close your heart. It means you protect it. You become more discerning, not more bitter. You learn to recognize the difference between someone who wants to love you and someone who wants to use you. You learn to sit with the discomfort of being alone rather than tolerate the pain of being unseen. And in that silence, in that solitude, you begin to heal. Healing doesn't come from chasing closure. It comes from choosing yourself, from understanding that your worth was never up for debate, that your softness was never weakness, that your willingness to stay loyal in chaos wasn't foolish. It was love, just misplaced. And now, you get to place it where it belongs, in your own heart, in your own hands, in your own life, where peace is no longer a negotiation. You don't have to scream your worth to be heard. You don't have to prove your loyalty through suffering. You don't have to beg for a love that should have been offered freely. You only have to decide that you are done explaining why you deserve to be treated well. Done chasing. Done fixing what you didn't break. Done hoping they'll finally see what's been clear all along. When love is real, it arrives without pressure, without doubt, without performance. So let them go. Let the silence fall. Let the peace come in like a quiet wave, washing over every part of you that used to fight for scraps. This isn't giving up. This is rising up. This is remembering who you were before you convinced yourself you had to be earned. This is the end of emotional begging and the beginning of something so much better. 5. Your imaginary catastrophes. You're not a fortune teller, and yet you live as if you are, forecasting disaster after disaster, writing mental scripts for conversations that haven't happened, rehearsing pain that may never come. Every time you imagine the worst, your body tightens, your breath shortens, and your peace drains out of you like a slow leak. You try to control the future by preparing for it in your mind. But all that's really happening is that you're suffering twice. Once for something that hasn't happened, and once again for letting the fear of it shape your present. There's something exhausting about constantly preparing for impact, like walking through life in a flinch, always bracing for the next bad thing. It becomes a habit. You start believing that worrying keeps you safe, that if you think about every possible outcome, you'll be ready. But worry doesn't prepare you. It paralyzes you. It robs you of the only time you ever truly have, now. And the truth is, most of what you fear never becomes real. Most of the imagined conversations don't happen. Most of the failures you dread never show up. And even when they do, they never play out the way you pictured. Because reality is rarely as cruel as fear makes it out to be. We often talk about fear like it's logical, like it's helpful. But fear doesn't show up with facts. It shows up with noise. It hijacks your attention and points it at things that are out of your hands. And once you're hooked, your imagination takes over. Suddenly you're predicting the end of relationships, the collapse of plans, the judgment of others. all based on shadows. But shadows aren't proof. They're just absence of light. And you have more light than you think. It's not your job to predict the future. It's your job to be present in what's real. To face what is, not what might be. And yes, it's uncomfortable. The unknown always is. But discomfort isn't danger. That's the mistake your mind keeps making. Just because something is unfamiliar doesn't mean it's unsafe. Just because you don't know how something will turn out doesn't mean it will go badly. In fact, the best things in your life probably began without certainty. You moved anyway. You chose anyway. You trusted anyway. Fear has a clever way of disguising itself as logic. It tells you that you're being cautious, responsible, realistic. But most of the time, you're just running mental simulations of failure and calling it preparation. You end up rehearsing heartbreak before love even has a chance. You imagine being judged before you've spoken. You fear losing something before you've even had the courage to fully hold it. That's not safety. That's self-sabotage wearing a mask. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Today I escaped anxiety." Or no, I discarded it, because it was within me, in my own perceptions, not outside. This wasn't just philosophy, it was survival. The understanding that your mind can either be your sanctuary or your prison. And every time you choose to believe your anxious thoughts without questioning them, you reinforce the bars around you. But what if you chose to challenge those thoughts instead? What if you let them pass without grabbing onto them? What if you stopped trusting every fear that walked through the door of your mind? Anxiety thrives on what-ifs, but peace lives in what is. What is real right now? What do you actually know to be true in this moment? That's where your attention belongs. Because your nervous system doesn't know the difference between imagined danger and real danger. So every time you dive into worry, your body responds like it's under threat. Your stress rises, your patience shrinks, your clarity disappears. And yet, nothing has happened. Not really. You've just been at war with your own thoughts. The most frustrating part is that most of us know this. We know worry doesn't help. We know overthinking is draining. But the habit is so strong, it feels automatic. That's where awareness steps in. Not judgment, just awareness. You notice the fear rise. You feel the spiral begin. And instead of following it down, you pause. You breathe. You ground yourself in what's actually in front of you. And slowly, you teach your nervous system a new language. One where safety isn't built on control, but on trust. Trust in your ability to respond, no matter what happens. Trust that you are more resilient than you think. That even if something goes wrong, you'll adapt, you'll learn, you'll grow. Because you've done it before. Every difficult thing you've faced, you got through it. Maybe not perfectly, maybe not without scars, but you're still here. And that means your fear is not the full story. You're not fragile, you're just tired. Tired of holding the weight of every possible outcome. Tired of playing chess with imaginary problems. Tired of believing that everything depends on your vigilance. Let that go. You don't have to see every twist and turn ahead of time. You just have to be present for the step in front of you. And then the next. And then the next. Life doesn't require prediction. It requires participation. So take a breath. Drop your shoulders. You don't need to solve tomorrow today. You don't need to protect yourself from a future that doesn't exist yet. All you need is the courage to show up for what's real. And what's real is this. You are safe in this moment. You are breathing. You are aware. You are capable. And when fear comes knocking again, because it will, you'll know it for what it is. Noise, not prophecy, just noise. Let it pass. Because the more you stay in the now, the quieter that noise becomes. And in that quiet, something beautiful begins to grow. A trust in yourself, that no catastrophe, real or imagined, can take away. 6. Silent grudges that corrode you. Holding on to resentment feels like control, like if you just stay mad enough, guarded enough, cold enough, you won't be hurt again. You think that staying angry keeps you strong, that it creates distance between you and the people who did you wrong. But in truth, the only thing it builds is a prison, and you're the one locked inside. The grudge doesn't protect you. It poisons you, quietly, slowly, until your peace is so clouded you can't even remember what it felt like to be light. It doesn't always show up loudly either. Sometimes it's not the blow-up argument or the dramatic falling out that leaves the deepest scar. Sometimes it's the quiet hurt you never spoke about, the betrayal you never admitted stung, the apology you never got but kept waiting for. Those are the ones that linger, the ones that turn into invisible walls inside your heart. You go about your day like everything's fine, but deep down, you're still holding on to something, a name, a moment, a memory that tightens every time it surfaces, and you tell yourself it's not a big deal, that you've moved on. But if it still hurts when you remember it, it's not gone, it's buried. Forgiveness gets misunderstood. People think it's about excusing the behavior, letting someone off the hook, acting like it never happened. But forgiveness isn't about them, it's about you. It's about not carrying someone else's actions into your next chapter. It's about refusing to give the past that kind of power. Resentment, no matter how justified, anchors you to the moment you were hurt. It keeps you there, stuck in a loop. You replay the words, the decisions, the silence, and in doing so, you relive the pain. Not just once, over and over. And the worst part? They may not even know. They've moved on. They're living their life. Meanwhile, you're still burning with something they probably forgot. That's how grudges work. They disguise themselves as strength, when really they're wounds that never got to breathe. And healing doesn't happen in silence. It happens in release. In deciding that you're done giving energy to something that only takes from you. Holding on to anger becomes part of your identity. You start reacting from it, thinking from it, living through it. You think you're protecting yourself, but really, you're repeating a pattern that only makes things heavier. You avoid closeness, fearing betrayal. You pull away from love, expecting disappointment. You mistrust others because trust once got broken. But none of that is healing. It's just self-preservation, and it's exhausting. The real power isn't in staying angry, it's in choosing peace. Not because they earned it, not because they asked for it, but because you're tired of bleeding for someone else's mistake. That doesn't make you weak, it makes you wise. There's nothing soft about refusing to let the past pollute your future. It takes real strength to unclench your fists and walk away without revenge. To say, this hurt me, but it won't define me. You don't need to call them. You don't need to tell them. Forgiveness doesn't always require a conversation. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is release it internally, quietly, fully, and feel the weight start to fall off. The bitterness leaves your chest. The tension leaves your jaw. The story stops replaying every time you're alone. That's when you know you've let go, when their name doesn't trigger your entire nervous system anymore. And what's waiting on the other side of that release is more than just peace, it's freedom. You get to move forward without dragging the past behind you. You get to show up in relationships without old wounds clouding your view. You get to breathe, fully, finally. Not everything that hurt you has to stay part of you. You're allowed to heal. You're allowed to put it down, even if they never said sorry, even if they never acknowledged what they did. Your healing doesn't need their permission. You can let go without pretending it didn't happen. You can forgive without inviting them back into your life. Boundaries still matter. Lessons still matter. But the anger, the resentment, the heaviness, that's yours to release. And when you do, you make space. Space for joy, for love, for clarity. Because when your heart isn't full of old pain, it can finally open to something better. Letting go isn't a one-time act. It's a decision you might have to make over and over, especially on the hard days. But each time you choose peace over bitterness, you take your power back. Each time you choose not to react from the old story, you become more of who you're meant to be. And that version of you, the one who's not owned by anger, is the one who can finally rest. So if you're still carrying something, ask yourself, what would it feel like to be free from this? What would your life look like if you weren't weighed down by something that's already over? And then ask yourself the real question. Do they deserve that space in your mind? Or do you deserve that space for yourself? Not everything needs closure. Sometimes you are the closure. Sometimes your decision to be done, without drama, without revenge, without explaining yourself, is enough. You're not giving them a pass. You're giving yourself peace. And that's worth more than any grudge you could ever hold. 7. The fake finish line, called happiness. We've been told a lie so many times we stopped questioning it. The lie that happiness lives somewhere out there, in the next job, the next relationship, the next version of yourself. That once you finally make 6 figures, or move to a new city, or find that one person who just gets you, you'll arrive. You'll be whole. You'll be happy. So you chase, you grind, you scroll, you compare. You build this finish line in your mind, believing that once you cross it, everything will click into place. But what nobody says out loud is this: that finish line keeps moving. Every time you get close, it shifts. And no matter how fast you run, it never really feels like enough. It starts early. You think happiness is in getting good grades. Then it's graduating. Then it's landing the job. Then it's getting promoted. Then it's finding someone. Then it's settling down. Then it's starting over. The line is always just a little further away, and it's exhausting. You wake up with a life that looks fine on the outside, but inside, you're still waiting, still hoping, still thinking, maybe after this, I'll finally feel okay. But happiness was never meant to be a finish line. It was always supposed to be the way you walk, not where you're headed. You can have the money, the love, the success, and still feel empty. Because if the voice in your head is critical, if your nervous system is always on edge, if your self-worth depends on external achievements, nothing out there will ever be enough. You'll keep chasing newer, better, more, not because you're greedy, but because you've been trained to measure your worth by how far ahead you can get. You don't even realize it's happening. It's built into the culture. The ads, the algorithms, the timelines, all pushing you to chase an image of life instead of actually living it. Carl Jung once said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are, not to impress, not to accumulate, but to become." That's where real peace is found, not in arriving at some perfect version of your life, but in being present for the one you already have. Because here's the truth most people miss. Happiness doesn't announce itself with fireworks. It's not loud, it's not dramatic, it's subtle. It shows up in small moments. The way sunlight hits your face in the morning, the quiet after a long day, the warmth of a conversation that doesn't feel forced. But if your mind is always on the next thing, you'll miss it. You'll miss everything. Perfection is seductive. It gives you something to aim for. It feels productive. But it's a trap, because perfection doesn't exist, and the pursuit of it will leave you burnt out and numb. What you really want isn't perfection. It's peace. And peace doesn't come from having everything figured out. It comes from not needing to. It comes from showing up as you are and choosing to be kind to yourself anyway. It comes from realizing that you don't need to earn rest. That joy isn't something to deserve. It's something to notice. You've been taught to wait until you lose the weight, until your house looks better, until your mental health is fully healed, until your schedule clears up. But life isn't waiting for you to be ready. It's happening now. And if you're always waiting for the right time to be happy, you'll run out of time, because there is no perfect day. There's just today. And what you do with it, how you speak to yourself, how you treat others, how you choose to see your own life, that's where happiness begins. It's not in the dream vacation. It's in the way you make your coffee. It's not in the applause. It's in the quiet sense of pride you feel after keeping a promise to yourself. It's not in the big wins. It's in the daily rituals, the way you ground yourself, the way you pause, the way you take a breath before reacting. These aren't small things. They're the real things, and they add up, slowly, quietly, until one day you look around and realize you're not chasing anymore. You're living. There's nothing wrong with goals. Growth is important. Dreams matter, but not at the cost of your presence, not at the expense of your peace. If the process of becoming is filled with self-loathing and anxiety, what kind of person will you be once you arrive? If you don't know how to feel content without the title, the partner, the recognition, will you even know how to enjoy it when it comes? That's the question no one asks, because we assume happiness will teach us how to live. But really, how you live determines how happy you can be. Your habits matter more than your highlights. Your inner dialogue matters more than your resume. How you treat people on an ordinary day says more about your life than any photo on your feed. And the most powerful shift happens when you stop asking, "When will I be happy?" and start asking, "How can I create joy today with what I already have?" That question changes everything, because it takes the power back. It puts you in charge, not your job, not your bank account, not your relationship status, you. So, chase peace, not perfection. Chase moments of meaning. Chase conversations that fill your soul. Chase habits that make you proud. Let the version of you that's always rushing take a breath. Let the one that thinks happiness is out there somewhere sit down and rest. You're already allowed to be happy, not because everything is perfect, but because you're alive, because you're trying, because in this moment, you're here. And that's enough. There is no finish line, just a series of moments. And in each one, you get to decide how you'll show up. Not for the world, not for some imaginary audience, but for you. So let happiness be something you build, not something you wait for. Let it be messy. Let it be quiet. Let it be now. 8. Explaining yourself to everyone. There comes a point where you get tired of explaining yourself, not because you're hiding anything, but because the truth of your life doesn't need an audience to validate it. You start realizing that not every choice needs a speech, not every decision needs a detailed backstory, and not every person who asks deserves an answer. You're not a courtroom. You don't owe the world a constant justification for why you are the way you are, why you chose to stay, why you chose to leave, why you changed, why you didn't. The pressure to explain often comes from a deep need to be understood. And that makes sense. We're social beings. We want connection, clarity, closure. But the more you explain, the more you start to perform. You find yourself packaging your decisions in a way that others can digest, even if it means watering down your truth. You shrink your real reasons into something more palatable, less offensive, more socially acceptable. But who are you doing that for? Them? Or the part of you that still believes you need permission to be who you are? Every time you over-explain, you hand over a little piece of your power. You give people the impression that your choices are up for debate, that they get a vote, that your life is a democracy they're entitled to participate in. But your path is not a group project. It's not a survey. It's a personal journey shaped by what you've been through, what you value, and where you're going. And most of that isn't visible to anyone else. Silence is often mistaken for avoidance or arrogance, but it's neither. Silence is sacred. It's a decision, a boundary, a calm confidence that doesn't feel the need to prove itself. When you know who you are, you don't explain, you embody, you live, you breathe. You show up as yourself without the need to defend your presence. And ironically, that's when people start listening, because there's something powerful about a person who moves with quiet certainty. You don't have to explain your healing. You don't have to explain why you stop talking to certain people. You don't have to explain why your boundaries are tighter now, or why your priorities have changed. Growth can be quiet. It doesn't need a press release. You're allowed to change your mind. You're allowed to evolve and not update everyone on your progress. Sometimes, the most transformative moments of your life won't come with explanation, just action. There's a strange freedom that comes when you stop seeking approval. You begin to make choices for alignment, not applause. You start valuing peace over performance. And in that shift, life gets lighter. You stop rehearsing conversations in your head. You stop trying to be understood by people who are committed to misunderstanding you. You realize that not everyone can walk with you, and that's okay. Your life is not a PR campaign. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "Waste no more time arguing about what a good man should be. Be one." In other words, stop explaining and start living. People will form their own narratives no matter what you say. They'll twist your words, project their fears, hear what they want. Trying to control that is a battle you'll never win, and you don't have to. You don't owe the version of you that exists in someone else's head your energy. Let your choices speak for you. Let your peace be your answer. Let your consistency, your kindness, your boundaries, your evolution, say what words never could. You are not cold for keeping parts of your life private. You are not rude for choosing not to engage in conversations that lead nowhere. You are not selfish for protecting your inner world. That's wisdom. That's self-respect. That's knowing the difference between being real and being performative. There's nothing wrong with being clear when needed, but clarity doesn't always require elaboration. You can say, "This is my choice," and leave it at that. You can say, "I'm not comfortable discussing that," and let the silence hold the line. You can say nothing and still be right, because silence is not weakness. Sometimes silence is strength dressed in restraint. And here's the thing, the people who genuinely love and respect you, they don't need long explanations. They trust your heart. They honor your boundaries. They support your decisions even when they don't fully understand them. That's how you know they're your people. Not because they agree with everything, but because they don't demand you prove yourself. You don't have to exhaust yourself trying to make everyone comfortable with who you are. You don't need to edit your truth to make it easier to swallow. You don't need to dilute your growth so others don't feel left behind. If someone needs a full breakdown of your healing just to accept that you're different now, they're not really looking to understand. They're looking to control. And you've grown past that. You've come too far to keep handing out explanations like apologies. This is your life, your healing, your rhythm, your truth, and it's not up for review. You are not rude for choosing silence. You are not difficult for choosing peace. You are not distant for choosing self-respect. You are simply choosing to live aligned without constantly translating yourself for others. So stop explaining and start being. Start living as someone who no longer seeks permission to exist. Let that be your quiet rebellion. Let your actions, your stillness, your strength be the only explanation you ever need. 9. Habits that quietly kill your energy. Most people think energy is lost in big, dramatic ways: burnout, exhaustion, emotional crashes. But the truth is, energy is usually drained in silence, in small, seemingly harmless habits that sneak into your day and settle in like background noise. You don't notice them at first. The late-night scrolling that cuts into your sleep, the skipped breakfast that leaves your mind foggy, the automatic yes to things your body and soul are screaming no to. These tiny moments, repeated daily, chip away at your vitality. They don't look dangerous, but they are. Because the more they go unchecked, the more they slowly dismantle your clarity, your confidence, your capacity to show up fully. It's easy to ignore them. Easy to call them normal. After all, everyone's tired. Everyone's busy. Everyone's overstimulated. So you tell yourself it's just part of life. But over time, the cost becomes undeniable. You wake up heavy, not just in body, but in spirit. You feel behind before the day even begins. Your mind feels cluttered. Your decisions feel harder. And your willpower feels like it's on its last leg. And yet, the external pressures keep pushing. Deadlines, relationships, responsibilities. So you keep running on fumes, hoping no one notices how close you are to shutting down completely. And here's the thing. Most people think they need a complete life overhaul to fix it. A brand new routine, a bulletproof morning plan, a fitness transformation. But real change doesn't start that way. It starts with one decision, one habit, one small act of reclaiming your energy. Because energy isn't just about what you eat or how long you sleep. It's about what you tolerate, what you consume, what you allow into your mental, emotional, and physical space without realizing how heavy it actually is. You say yes out of politeness, and suddenly your week is packed with obligations that leave you depleted. You open your phone for 5 minutes, and 40 minutes later, you're deep in someone else's drama, comparing lives, absorbing noise, forgetting what you even picked the phone up for in the first place. You skip water because you're too busy, forgetting that a dehydrated brain is an unfocused brain. You push off movement because rest feels more convenient, not realizing that motion isn't punishment, it's fuel. These aren't small issues, they are signals, and ignoring them doesn't make you stronger, it makes you silently sink. Carl Jung once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." That's exactly what these habits do. They operate just beneath awareness, shaping your mood, your thoughts, your motivation, until you begin to believe that feeling drained is just who you are. But it's not who you are. It's the sum of what you repeat. And the most powerful shift happens when you stop accepting fatigue as your identity and start treating it like a signal for change. You don't need to change everything overnight. That's the trap. That's what keeps people stuck. The illusion that if you can't fix it all right now, it's not worth starting. But it is. Because momentum doesn't come from motivation. It comes from action. From choosing to break one small pattern today. Drink water first thing. Stretch your body for 5 minutes. Say no to something you always say yes to out of guilt. Set your phone down 30 minutes before bed. These aren't just healthy habits. They're declarations, proof that you're no longer willing to betray yourself in the name of convenience or approval. It won't feel easy at first. In fact, it might feel pointless. One glass of water doesn't change your life. One walk won't fix your stress. But it sends a message to your mind and body. I am paying attention now. And the more consistently you follow through on those tiny promises, the more you start trusting yourself again. That trust builds self-respect. And self-respect fuels discipline. And discipline is what unlocks the energy you've been missing. So much of your strength is buried under habits you've normalized. You think your motivation is broken, but maybe you're just tired from carrying too many things that don't belong to you. Maybe your body isn't lazy. Maybe it's just done asking nicely. Maybe your mind isn't foggy because you're weak, but because you've been overstimulated and undernourished for too long. The change you're craving isn't as far as it seems. It just looks smaller than you expected. Cut one thing today that drains you. Just one. It could be a toxic conversation you keep entertaining, a mindless scroll before bed, that extra task you agreed to out of habit, not joy. Remove it, not with drama, but with clarity. And in that space, insert one thing that restores you. A quiet moment, a short walk, a boundary, a breath. Let that be your reset. Energy is sacred. It's not something you get more of by chasing it. You protect it by managing what you allow to steal it. And once you start seeing your habits through that lens, everything changes. You stop asking, "Why am I so tired?" and start noticing all the things pulling from you. Noticing is power. It means you're no longer sleepwalking through your routines. It means you're finally aware. So if you feel drained, stuck, scattered, don't wait for the perfect routine or a wave of motivation. Start now, quietly, gently, intentionally. Reclaim your energy one small act at a time. Not for productivity, not to become some optimized machine, but because you deserve to feel good in your body, because you deserve to wake up without dreading the day, because your presence, clear, calm, energized, is one of the most powerful things you can bring into this world. And that begins with the habits you choose to keep and the ones you finally let go. 10. Constant criticism, especially of yourself. There's a voice inside your head that you've been listening to for so long, you don't even question it anymore. It tells you that you're not doing enough, that you're always behind, that you should be further along by now, that everyone else seems to have it together, so why don't you? It whispers harsh things when you're tired, when you slip, when you fall short, and somehow you believe it. You don't stop to ask where that voice came from, or why it sounds so much like a bully dressed as a coach. You just assume it must be right, because it's yours. But here's the truth. That voice isn't truth. It's habit, and it's keeping you stuck. You're not lazy. You're not broken. You're overwhelmed, overstimulated, pulled in 1,000 directions and trying to carry it all quietly. You wake up with a weight in your chest and still manage to get out of bed. Still manage to show up. Still manage to keep going, even when your inner dialogue is tearing you apart. That's not weakness, that's strength. But your mind has gotten so used to being hard on itself that it doesn't know how to speak any other language. You've mistaken pressure for motivation, criticism for discipline, self-punishment for growth. But you don't shame a flower into blooming. You don't yell at a wound to heal faster. And you won't become your best self by berating the current version of you. Progress doesn't come from force. It comes from understanding, from asking better questions. Not, "What's wrong with me?" but "What do I need?" Not, "Why can't I just do this?" but "What's blocking me?" When you trade judgment for curiosity, everything softens. The path clears. You stop reacting and start responding. You stop fighting yourself and start working with yourself. That shift is powerful, because when you change the way you speak to yourself, you change the way you treat yourself. You make room for rest without guilt. You make room for mistakes without labeling yourself as a failure. You begin to recognize that growth isn't linear, and it certainly isn't perfect. There will be days you feel on fire, and days you feel like you're unraveling. Both are part of the process. Both are allowed. And neither one says anything about your worth. Carl Jung once said, "I am not what happened to me, I am what I choose to become." That includes what you choose to believe about yourself. That includes the narrative you repeat in your mind every single day. If your thoughts are always anchored in self-blame, self-doubt, and self-attack, then no matter what you achieve, it will never feel like enough. You'll reach your goals and still feel empty. You'll cross milestones and still hear that voice saying, "Yeah, but you could have done it better." So maybe it's not about doing more. Maybe it's about pausing long enough to ask, where did I learn to speak to myself like this? And more importantly, do I still need to? Because there's a version of you waiting on the other side of that harshness. A version that still has dreams, still wants joy, still believes peace is possible, but they need you to be on their side first. Not just when things are going well, but especially when they're not. Anyone can offer themselves grace on a good day. But what about the messy ones? The ones where nothing gets done, where you feel like giving up, where everything feels heavy and loud and pointless. That's when you need the kindest version of yourself the most. Being compassionate with yourself doesn't mean you're giving up. It means you're creating the conditions for sustainable change. Because discipline built on shame will always crack. But discipline built on care, on truth, on kindness, on understanding, that's unshakable. That's the kind that lasts. You show up for yourself not because you're afraid of falling behind, but because you believe you're worth taking care of. That's a quiet kind of power most people never learn. But you can. It starts small. Catching that voice in the act. When it says, "You're so behind," respond with, "I'm doing the best I can with what I have." When it says, "You always mess this up," say, "This is a pattern I can learn to shift." It's not about fake positivity. It's about truth. And the truth is, you're carrying a lot. You've come a long way. And you're still here, still trying. That deserves more credit than you're giving yourself. The world will always be quick to judge, to demand, to expect. So don't become another critic in your own life. Be your anchor, your reset, your reminder that you don't need to earn rest or prove your worth, or explain why you're struggling. Struggle is human. Rest is human. You are human. And humanity was never meant to be a performance. There will always be someone doing more, achieving faster, looking cleaner on the outside. But their journey isn't yours. Your story is rich with context, with battles no one sees, with resilience you forget to recognize. Stop making the mistake of thinking your inner mess disqualifies you from growth. It doesn't. In fact, it's what makes your growth real. So, as you move forward, through your habits, your goals, your healing, remember this. The voice in your head matters more than you think. Let it be one that builds, not breaks. One that guides, not punishes. Let it sound more like a coach, less like a critic. And when in doubt, pause and ask, what would help me right now? Not what would make you impressive. Not what would make others applaud. Just what would help. That question, asked consistently, will take you further than any harsh inner monologue ever could. Because compassion isn't weakness, it's fuel for everything you're becoming. 11. The need to always be right. There's a strange pressure that creeps in when we feel the need to always be right. It's subtle at first, a slight tension in your chest when someone questions your opinion, a reflex to explain yourself when no one asked, that feeling that if you let something go unchallenged, you've somehow lost. But the truth is, being right isn't always the victory it appears to be, because what it often costs you is far more valuable than proving a point. It costs your time, your calm, your presence, sometimes even your relationships. In the moment, defending your position feels justified. You've got logic, facts, experience, and it feels like if you don't speak up, the other person wins. But this isn't a courtroom, and life isn't a debate stage. Most of the time, there is no prize for being right, only tension. You walk away from the conversation mentally drained, heart racing, replaying what you said, what they said, what you should have said, and for what? To protect a version of yourself that can't be wrong. That's not protection. That's ego, dressed up as certainty. The need to be right doesn't always come from arrogance. Sometimes it comes from fear. Fear of not being heard. Fear of being misunderstood. Fear that if you're wrong, you'll be seen as less competent, less intelligent, less valuable. But being wrong doesn't make you less. It makes you human. Everyone misses the mark. Everyone misreads the situation. Everyone forgets details, reacts emotionally, changes their mind. What matters more than being right is being rooted, grounded enough in your own worth that disagreement doesn't feel like a threat. Carl Jung said, "Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves." That's especially true when it comes to arguments. If every disagreement feels personal, if every challenge makes your chest tighten, it might be less about the other person and more about your inner world. The need to be right often hides deeper insecurities. Maybe you weren't listened to growing up. Maybe you were always the one to fix things. Maybe somewhere along the way, you learned that being wrong meant being weak. But you're not that child anymore. You're not in that chapter anymore. You can be wrong now and still be safe. There's a kind of quiet strength in saying, "You might be right," and meaning it. In stepping back from the tug of war and choosing peace over pride. It doesn't mean you have no opinion. It means you've grown past the need to fight every battle, because not every hill is worth dying on. Some arguments are just noise, distractions that pull you away from what actually matters. And in those moments, the strongest move isn't to win, it's to let go. Imagine what your days would feel like if you didn't take the bait every time someone misunderstood you. If you didn't feel the need to explain every detail. If you could hear someone's view without needing to correct it. You'd have more energy, more clarity, more time to focus on things that fill you instead of drain you. Letting go of the need to be right is like dropping a weight you didn't realize you were carrying. It's not always easy, especially when you're passionate about something, when you know you're right. But that's when it matters most. That's when choosing grace over ego becomes a practice. A conscious decision to prioritize your peace over your pride. You don't have to prove anything. You don't have to convince anyone. Your value doesn't increase when you win an argument, and it doesn't decrease when you walk away from one. There's a difference between standing for truth and chasing validation. The first is rooted in confidence. The second is rooted in insecurity. When you know who you are, you don't argue to be seen. You speak to be clear, and if that clarity isn't received, you move on. You don't cling. You don't spiral. You don't waste hours trying to fix what doesn't want to be understood. You keep your energy. You protect your focus. And in doing that, you build something stronger than the illusion of control. You build inner peace. You realize that your opinion doesn't need an audience to be valid, that your perspective doesn't lose value when someone else disagrees, that the goal isn't to be right. The goal is to be free. Free from overthinking, free from over-explaining, free from the emotional tug-of-war that keeps you tethered to people's approval. It's not about being passive. It's about being wise, about knowing when to engage and when to let it pass, about choosing your peace over your pride, about saying less and meaning more. Because the loudest voice in the room isn't always the one that's right. Sometimes it's just the one that hasn't learned to listen yet. You can still hold your values, still express your thoughts, still stand up for yourself, but you don't need to do it with clenched fists and tight jaws. You can do it with calm, with clarity, with quiet confidence that doesn't need to shout to be heard. And when someone tries to pull you into a power struggle, you simply don't go. Because you know what's at stake, your energy, your balance, your time. And those things are worth more than any temporary win. So let them think what they want. Let them believe they're right. Let the conversation end without the last word. You don't lose anything by walking away with your peace intact. If anything, you gain something far greater: freedom. And with that freedom comes the space to grow, to listen, to reflect, to choose your battles wisely and your silence intentionally. Because when you stop needing to be right, you start being real. And being real, grounded, present, self-aware, that's where your power lives. 12. Comparing yourself to everyone online. It's easy to lose track of yourself when you're constantly seeing curated snapshots of other people's lives. You open your phone and in seconds you're flooded with images of perfect bodies, perfect homes, perfect relationships, perfect careers. Everyone seems to be moving faster, looking better, doing more. It's subtle at first, that tightening in your chest. You weren't feeling bad about yourself before, but now you're questioning everything. Your pace, your progress, even your worth. Not because anything changed, but because your mind was hijacked by comparison. We live in a time where it's normal to scroll through hundreds of lives before breakfast, where success is measured by likes, bodies by filters, and happiness by posts. And even though deep down we know it's not real, that it's just the trailer, not the full movie, it still gets to us. Because the brain doesn't filter reality when it's under pressure. It doesn't say, "This is staged." It says, "Why am I not there yet?" And just like that, your peace evaporates. You were proud of your progress until you saw someone else's before and after. You were content with your life until someone else's joy looked shinier. But here's the truth that cuts through all that noise. You are not behind. You are not late. You're not in the wrong place. You're walking a different path, one that's only visible to you. And because it's yours, no one else can validate it or compare it. The moment you start seeing yourself through someone else's timeline, you lose the thread of your own story. And that's a story worth staying connected to, because it's real, it's messy, it's honest, and it's yours. When you finally stop comparing and start accepting, something inside you shifts. You start owning your pace. You begin to trust that just because it hasn't happened yet doesn't mean it never will. You understand that timing isn't universal, it's personal. You realize that real transformation doesn't always look like a viral moment. Sometimes it's quiet, sometimes it's slow, but it's always meaningful. Comparison steals more than joy. It steals identity. It makes you question your instincts, doubt your choices, and slowly you start shifting your goals to match what you think will be most impressive instead of what feels most aligned. But impressing people who don't know the full picture will never fulfill you, because even if you get to that milestone, it won't feel like yours. It'll feel like you borrowed someone else's definition of success and wore it like a costume. The best glow-ups. They don't happen online. They happen in private, in silence, in the in-between moments when no one's watching and you're just doing the work, healing, learning, building, resting. That's where the real change takes root. Not in likes, not in comments, not in public validation, but in the invisible layers of your growth that no algorithm will ever capture. And if you stay grounded in that, nothing anyone posts can shake you. Start muting what makes you feel small. You don't need to explain it. You don't need to apologize for protecting your mental space. If someone's content makes you feel like you're constantly coming up short, it's okay to step back. This isn't jealousy. It's self-awareness. It's saying, I need to hear my own voice louder than everyone else's right now. And that's not selfish. That's survival in a world that profits off of your insecurity. Your worth is not based on visibility. Your value doesn't increase when more people see you. In fact, Some of the most meaningful parts of you can only be nurtured when you're not being watched, when you're offline, when you're not trying to prove anything. The parts of you that need the most care often grow best in stillness, away from comparison, away from performance, just real time with yourself. You have no idea what someone else had to sacrifice to get what they're showing off. You don't know their story, their struggle, their doubts. Social media doesn't show the breakdowns, the panic attacks, the lost friendships, the sleepless nights. It shows the highlight, and if you're comparing your behind the scenes to their edited preview, you're always going to feel less. But you're not less. You're just seeing the tip of their iceberg and comparing it to the entirety of yours. So instead of scrolling to measure yourself, scroll to learn, scroll to laugh, scroll to connect. But don't scroll to assess your value, because nothing out there will ever tell you what your heart already knows. That you're on your own timeline, with your own rhythm, and your own kind of magic. And when you honor that, you begin to move differently, more grounded, less reactive, less needy for external confirmation. What if you just trusted your process? What if you believed that your slower days were still sacred, that your small steps still mattered, that your story, with all its pauses and plot twists, is still unfolding exactly as it's supposed to? There is no universal blueprint for becoming. The pressure to keep up only exists if you keep looking sideways. The moment you look inward, the race disappears. All that remains is your path, and that path is worth staying on, even when it's quiet, even when no one claps for your progress, even when someone else's journey looks louder. Because your journey, it's real, it's raw, and it's leading somewhere beautiful. Keep going. Not to catch up, but because you finally realize you were never behind to begin with. 13. Overcommitment and people-pleasing. There's a version of you that learned to say yes before even thinking. Not because you always wanted to, but because somewhere along the line, you started believing that your value came from being needed. That if you could keep everyone happy, no one would leave. That if you just stayed available, agreeable, accommodating, you'd avoid conflict, disappointment, and rejection. So you kept saying yes. You took on one more task, one more favor, one more commitment, even when your body was begging for rest, even when your mind was drowning in noise. And the scariest part is, people got used to it. They stopped asking if you had time or energy. They assumed you'd be there, because you always were. But you're not a machine. You're not built to constantly give, to stretch, to absorb, without ever pausing to receive. You're human. You need stillness. You need boundaries. You need to hear your own voice again after weeks or months of trying to meet everyone else's expectations. The problem is, when your default setting is yes, saying no feels like a betrayal. It feels like you're letting someone down, like you're failing. But it's not failure, it's freedom. It's the first sign that you're finally starting to respect yourself the way you've always respected others. Burnout isn't a badge of honor. It's a warning sign. It's your system blinking red, telling you that this pace is not sustainable. And still, most people push through, because we've romanticized overcommitment. We wear exhaustion like it's a trophy, proof that we're hardworking, selfless, loyal. But none of those qualities mean anything if you're crumbling on the inside. If your loyalty is costing you your health, your peace, your sense of self, then it's not loyalty, it's self-abandonment. Carl Jung once said, "The greatest burden a child must bear is the unlived life of the parent." And maybe that's where some of this people-pleasing started. You learned to be what others needed, to carry what others couldn't, to stay small so others could feel big. But you're not that child anymore, and it's no longer your job to keep everyone comfortable. Your job now is to take up space, to protect your time, to value your own needs, even when no one else validates them. Saying no is not rude, it's clear, it's a complete sentence. You don't have to explain it. You don't need to soften it with a long apology. You don't owe anyone a spreadsheet of your energy levels. If it doesn't feel right, if it stretches you too thin, if it pulls you away from what matters, you're allowed to decline. And not just allowed, but expected to, if you want to build a life that honors your truth instead of other people's demands. You are allowed to rest, not because you earned it through exhaustion, but because you are a living being who deserves recovery. You're allowed to leave texts on read, not because you're ignoring anyone, but because your nervous system isn't built to be in constant connection. You're allowed to prioritize silence, to cancel plans, to not be available all the time. That doesn't make you unreliable. It makes you real. And real people have limits. Overcommitting might make you feel useful, but it eventually makes you invisible, even to yourself. You start forgetting what you want, what lights you up, what actually matters to you. Because your schedule is full of everyone else's needs, you start reacting instead of choosing, drifting instead of directing. And slowly, your identity becomes a patchwork of other people's expectations. But you are not here to be everything to everyone. You are here to be deeply aligned with the few things that matter most. Peace isn't selfish. It's sacred. It's what allows you to show up with presence, not resentment, with depth, not depletion. When you say yes to everything, you dilute your power. You scatter your energy across a dozen things and show up halfway for all of them. But when you say no, even to good things, you make space to say yes to the things that are actually meant for you. That's not selfish, that's wise, and it's hard, especially if you've been wired to seek approval through service. But every time you choose yourself, you rewire that story. You teach yourself that your needs matter, that your rest is valid, that you don't have to break in order to be loved. Start small. One pause before every yes. One boundary where there used to be a blurred line. One moment of reflection before committing out of habit. You're not going to unlearn people-pleasing in a day, but you can start by listening to that quiet inner voice that says, I don't want to do this, and honoring it instead of overriding it. That voice is you, the real you, the one who's been waiting for you to come home. You don't need to be accessible 24/7 to be a good person. You don't need to explain every number. You don't need to earn rest by breaking down first. You just need to be honest with yourself, with your energy, with your time. That's where peace begins, not with productivity, but with presence, not with sacrifice, but with self-awareness. And when you start living from that place, everything changes, not overnight, but slowly, steadily, in the way you breathe easier, sleep better, speak clearer, stand taller. Let go of the version of you that believed being loved meant being useful. Let go of the story that your worth comes from being everything to everyone. It never did. You were always enough, even when you had nothing to give. And now it's time to give something back to yourself, your time, your space, your voice. That's not selfish, that's sacred, and it's long overdue. 14. The identity you outgrew. There's a quiet kind of discomfort that shows up when you start to feel like a stranger inside the identity you've been wearing for years. Maybe you were the loud one, the funny one, the reliable one, the ambitious one, and at some point, that version of you worked. It served a purpose. It helped you connect, helped you cope, helped you feel safe in a world that demanded a clear label. But now, something doesn't feel quite right. You're showing up the same way, saying the same things, doing what you've always done, but it feels hollow. And you can't quite explain it. You just know. You've outgrown the role. The strange thing is, no one tells you that outgrowing a version of yourself can be more painful than leaving a person. Because that identity, it's not just a habit. It's who people know you as. It's how you've been seen, praised, accepted. So when you start shedding that skin, people notice. And not always kindly. They might say you've changed, that you're distant, that you're not as fun, not as driven, not as available. And maybe they're right, but not in the way they think. You're not abandoning who you were. You're stepping into who you're becoming. But there's grief in that shift. Letting go of an old identity means letting go of the comfort it gave you. Even if it wasn't always healthy. Even if it drained you. Because it was familiar. It was predictable. And there's something oddly grounding about knowing exactly who you're expected to be. But growth doesn't care about comfort. It asks more of you. It asks you to leave the well-worn path and build a new one with your bare hands. That's why it feels so lonely sometimes. Because evolving often requires isolation before integration. Carl Jung said, "In each of us, there is another whom we do not know." And that unknown part, the one that feels foreign and unfamiliar, is often the next version of ourselves trying to emerge. But we resist it. Not because we don't want to grow, but because we're afraid we won't be loved once we do. We've been conditioned to believe our identity is our worth. That if we stop being the achiever, we'll be overlooked. If we stop being the people pleaser, we'll be abandoned. If we stop being the fixer, we'll be forgotten. But that's not truth. That's fear. You don't owe the world a consistent performance. You don't have to keep playing the same role just because people liked you in it. Your identity is not a contract you can't break. You're allowed to change, to soften, to slow down, to speak up, to disappear for a while and come back different. You're allowed to grow out of places, people, mindsets, and you don't need anyone's permission to do it. The most dangerous thing you can do is stay loyal to an old version of yourself out of guilt. Just because that version helped you survive doesn't mean it's the one that will help you thrive. You can thank it for getting you here and still choose to move forward. Because survival mode isn't meant to be permanent. At some point, you have to put the armor down and learn how to live, not just endure. Sometimes growth won't be noticed by anyone but you. There won't be applause. There won't be recognition. It might just look like choosing not to react the way you used to, saying no when the old you would have said yes, walking away instead of trying to prove your point, not engaging, not performing, not explaining. It'll feel strange at first, but that silence, that stillness, that's your next level unfolding. And here's what no one really talks about. The people around you might not celebrate your growth, because your transformation forces them to confront their own. When you stop playing the role, they have to adjust the script. And not everyone is ready for that. Some will try to pull you back into the old version of yourself. Not because they're malicious, but because your change unsettles their stability. They liked the you they could predict, the one who fit neatly into their life. But your evolution was never meant to make others comfortable. It was meant to make you whole. You may lose some relationships along the way, and it will hurt. But what you'll gain is far more valuable: alignment, peace, integrity, the quiet knowing that you're no longer pretending. You're no longer dimming or twisting or performing just to be accepted. You're living from a place of truth, even if that truth is still unfolding. There's something powerful about meeting yourself where you are now, not where you were 5 years ago, not where people still expect you to be. Right now, in this season, in this mindset, with this heart. It might feel like starting over, but really, it's starting for real. And every time you choose authenticity over approval, you get closer to the life that was meant for you, not the one you built just to survive. So, breathe. You don't need to rush this. Let the old version of you rest. Let the roles you no longer relate to fade out. There's no need to explain your shift. Real growth doesn't always need a speech. Sometimes it just needs space. And you, more than anyone, deserve to take up that space fully, unapologetically, and without guilt. You're not lost. You're just no longer limited. Let that be your new beginning. 15. The fear of starting over. Starting over doesn't mean you failed. It means you were brave enough to admit something wasn't right, that something needed to change, and that takes more courage than anyone ever gives credit for. See, there's this idea that progress is always a straight line, that once you start walking down a path, you're supposed to keep going no matter what, even if it starts to feel wrong, even if the road gets darker, heavier, more disconnected from who you really are. People will tell you, stick with it, be consistent, don't quit. But what they don't tell you is that sometimes continuing is the real trap, and starting over is the way out. We associate beginnings with loss, with wasted time, with shame. We look at the years we spent in the wrong job, the wrong relationship, the wrong version of ourselves, and we tell ourselves it was all for nothing. But what if it wasn't? What if every misstep was preparing you to start again more wisely, more consciously, more aligned? You're not going back to square one. You're returning to yourself, but this time with experience. The fear of starting over is really the fear of the unknown, of letting go of what's familiar, even if it's painful. We tell ourselves, I've come this far, I can't just walk away. But here's the truth. If where you've come to doesn't feel right, why keep going? Who are you proving anything to? It's not weakness to pivot, it's wisdom. It means you're finally listening to yourself, not your ego, not other people's expectations, but the quiet truth that's been whispering, this isn't it. Seneca once said, every new beginning comes from some other beginning's end. And that's the part most people struggle with, the ending, the letting go. Because even if it's hurting you, there's comfort in the known. You knew who you were in that place, that job, that role. Starting over means stepping into something unformed, unpredictable. It means becoming a beginner again. And for most of us, that's terrifying. But it's also where freedom lives, because when you no longer need to carry the weight of who you were, you become free to explore who you can be. It's important to understand that starting over isn't always dramatic. Sometimes it's subtle. It's waking up one morning and deciding not to tolerate disrespect anymore. It's turning down a job offer that looks good on paper but feels wrong in your gut. It's letting go of a friendship that drains more than it gives. It's not always quitting your job or moving to a new city, though it can be. Sometimes it's simply allowing yourself to dream again after you stopped believing you were allowed to. But we delay these resets because we convince ourselves we're too far in, too old, too late, too tied up in our past choices. That kind of thinking chains you to a future you don't even want, and it steals the only thing that really matters, your peace. If the life you're living is costing you your peace, then it's too expensive. And no amount of sunk time, no amount of should've or what if can justify staying stuck when your soul is asking to move. You don't need permission to change direction. You don't need a dramatic breakdown or a rock-bottom moment to justify a reset. You can simply decide, today, that the version of you who got here isn't the one who's going to take you forward. And that's not betrayal. That's evolution. That's growth. Starting over is less about changing everything and more about changing the intention behind everything. You may still live in the same city, still have the same job, but your mindset, your boundaries, your purpose, those things can shift. And when they do, they change everything around them. Because when you show up different, the world meets you differently. Opportunities you couldn't see before start to appear. People who align with your values begin to show up. The things you used to chase start to lose their grip. You move with clarity instead of confusion. And yes, the beginning may feel lonely. You may not have the same circle cheering you on. You may not have a roadmap. You might stumble. You'll doubt. You'll want to go back. But keep going, because every person you admire, every story that moved you, started with someone deciding they couldn't keep living the same day over and over. They chose the discomfort of beginning over the numbness of staying. That's what made the difference. The hardest part is often the first step. That moment when you pack up the version of yourself you've outgrown and step into the unknown. But once you do, something incredible happens. You begin to feel light again. Not because the path is easy, but because it's yours. And that kind of ownership, that kind of alignment, creates momentum. Slowly, quietly, the fog lifts. And you start to see who you're becoming. Not someone brand new, but someone more honest, more whole. So don't fear the reset. Don't let the voice in your head tell you it's too late, or too risky, or too selfish. Listen instead to the part of you that's tired of pretending, that's exhausted from performing, that's quietly craving a new chapter. Let that voice lead, because it knows the way. You were not meant to shrink yourself to fit into a life that no longer fits. You were meant to expand, to evolve, to rise. And sometimes, the only way to do that is to start again. Even if your hands are shaking, even if your voice trembles, even if no one understands, begin anyway. This is not the end. It's the invitation to become everything you were too afraid to be before. You are not lost. You are simply becoming. The world may not understand your quiet transformation, but one day your silence will speak louder than everything you left behind. Watch the next video now, and thank you for being a part of Stoic Journal.